minor things we got to take care of. So I've been trying to figure out what to do at this time. And I figured we should just ask the guests, like, what have you been doing during this whole period that's actually been saving you money? Any thoughts there for you, Katie? Just ask
for me?
the guests. What have you been doing?
Oh God, there's echo in the back.
No, it's just me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was him.
Gotcha. Yeah, that sounds like a good question. I'm down to answer that.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, how have I been trying to save money? Well, first of all, I'm trying to avoid taking out too much with Grab food. I think in the first week I was tempted to just constantly take out, but man, that got expensive really quick, especially now that they're increasing the delivery fees and whatnot. So I've been eating at home more, cooking a lot, and with all my beautiful fresh veggies. And yeah, also just, enjoying the fact that since I can't go out, I don't have to spend all the extra money on going to cafes all the time. I just make coffee at home. It's great. It's very effective budgetary-wise.
Yeah. Actually, speaking about the first week of this whole MCO thing with Grab, did you notice that Grab had the 30% discount?
Yeah, they did.
Did you also notice that they also had some other deal? I know you're vegetarian, but they had this like 2-for-1 for certain chicken things. But I think there were also like non-vegetarian non-meat options. So what I actually ended up doing was I ordered those because that was like a deal by itself. You didn't need to put the promo code in. So I ended up ordering that, and I put the promo code in of like 30% off. So I literally, I probably saved 50-60% doing that.
Oh, smart. Yeah, I think I ignored the 2-for-1 deals because most of them were like fried chicken. I'm like, I'm not going to eat fried chicken. So I missed out.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's actually dig right into this. So thank you everyone who's popping on by already. If you are here, just leave a message, let us know, say hi or something. But today we have on the show Katie, a good friend of mine from the same continent, just not the same country.
Yeah.
But you are also, I guess more importantly in the context of this conversation, you're I guess a recruiter for Mindvalley, right?
Yeah.
And so you know the ins and outs of what people are actually doing from a resume perspective, from an interview perspective. So we would love to get your thoughts and opinions on that. But before we dig into all of that, is there anything about you that I missed out on?
No, that's definitely covers the most of it. Yeah, I'm originally from the US. I've been doing stuff related to recruitment for over 3 years now. 2 years, it was in a nonprofit setting. And then this past year and a half or so, it's been in a corporate setting. And apart from that, like usually in recruitment, I'm doing from the whole journey. So all the way from like resume screening in the very beginning, all the way into the offer management stage. So I'm happy to, lend my perspective on what the recruiters are typically looking for, what typically really stands out to us in terms of candidates, and what also could be kind of a detractor, and just to help everyone else.
All the little secrets, yeah?
All the little insider secrets that they don't tell you, yes.
Yeah. You want to join Mindvalley? Yeah, today is the episode.
Today is the best chance to
best chance. So ask all the questions today. We have the recruiter in the house, right? So it is your chance. And I want to clarify, are there only 3 countries in that continent? Like Canada, the US, and Mexico. Is that the 3 only?
Okay. That's North America.
Yep.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah. Cool stuff.
Yeah. And so the reason why we wanted to bring you on today was because we talk a lot about different ways of dealing with money, right? And primarily we talk a lot about investing money, but we always talk about the need, like before you even start investing, the most important thing you can do for yourself, and the biggest return you can get is making sure you get yourself a job that you enjoy, and second of all, that has the ability for you to grow in, right? So that you can command a higher and higher salary as your skills improve, right? So that's just to give you some context. So that being said, though, once let's say someone is like, they're on the same train of thought of like, yes, the best thing I can do for myself is get a higher paying job, and especially with people in this current situation where they might not know if they have a job waiting for them at the end of this. Do you have advice for how people should start managing this whole process?
Definitely. I mean, I think, during this time, everything's very uncertain. No one really knows what's going to happen. Am I going to, lose my job? Am I going to be able to find a new job that I've been kind of gunning for the past couple of months? No one really knows. So the best way to kind of handle that is to make sure you're taking practical steps now to sort of bulletproof you against whatever is going to happen in the economy. And that could be simple things from like reconnecting to some of your old network, to learning new skills on online courses. But most importantly, I think you can really use this time as a period for reflection on your career development and actually start to polish up some of your interview skills, your resume skills. So that way, if you do ever need to apply in the future, once things kind of settle down after the movement control order is done, you're ready to go.
Nice. So let's actually start there with resume, right? What is your thought about resumes? Like, what makes a good resume good, and how should someone tackle that like daunting task of putting together, 1 page or 2 pages about them when they don't really know what the employers are looking for?
That's a great question. And I think a lot of times when people are approaching resumes, they already are like, okay, I have to have this like 1 page, has to be beautiful. They're just going to jump right into it. But I actually think that the preparation that you do beforehand sets you up so much when it comes to success later on. So one of the first things that I like to advise people to do before they even start making the resume for applying to a job is actually to create a master CV. What is this master CV? It's basically, it can be a Google Doc or Word doc, whatever, that just lists out every single job that you've ever had or every project that you've ever been in. These aren't meant to be put on your final resume. It's just to kind of brainstorm every single opportunity that you've been in. So that way you can really think about, okay, in this particular experience, what did I do? What did I achieve? What did I learn? And then you move on to the next one. What did I do? What did I achieve? What I learned? And that way you can also start to kind of group similar experiences or like, relevant like positions together. Because you never know, like, maybe you start in accounting, right? And you have a lot of accounting experiences, but maybe eventually you might have to make a change to a different industry because, they're just not hiring so much anymore. So when you have that master CV that has a variety of different skills or projects that you've worked on, you can then draw that into a future resume. So I recommend starting with that first, just to get everything out of your brain. So that way you know what you have to work with. And then once you've created that master CV, that's when you can actually start to look at the jobs that you're wanting to apply to. So if you're wanting to, apply to a particular role, let's say, could be something like one thing we often recruit for in Mindvalley is customer success. So you're wanting to apply for a customer success position. You can actually go online and find some sample job descriptions of some of the companies that you're looking for or in that particular role, and actually pull them out and see what are the common things that they're looking for in terms of the skill sets or the requirements. And one little tip that I actually like to use a lot when I'm applying to jobs is you can even copy paste that job description and put it into a word cloud. You guys know what a word cloud is, right? Where
let's just start from assume they don't know what it is. Like, how does it work?
Yeah, so there's online programs that you can Google search, like word cloud. And these are basically programs where you copy and paste text into this program, and then it'll spit out like a visual representation of all the words that you copied into it. And the words that appear most often, they'll be bigger words. So like, for example, if you were to do this with a job description, you can copy paste the job description from the company website, put it into this word cloud program. And then the words that are the biggest, those are the words that you know, okay, these are the ones that are repeated the most. I need to make sure that my resume is including those words inside. And you could even like, you know, do a word cloud of the job description itself, and then a word cloud of your resume, and see like, you know, are the same words popping out most often? If it is, great, I'm on the right track. But if like totally different words are showing up, maybe this isn't quite tailored to the job description as much as I would like. This is so important because, first of all, if a recruiter is looking at your resume, I mean, I hate to say it, but usually we only spend like 5 seconds or so looking at each resume.
No, I think we should actually dig deeper into that, though, right? People are not aware of something of that scenario, right? And I think they're like, oh yeah, you know, I've spent hours on this. This person's going to take all the time in the world to make sure they're going through it. But tell us the reality. Like, why is that the case? Yeah.
The reality.
How do we mesmerize you, right? Ultimately, for you to pick us. Right?
Yeah. The reality is usually when I'm ready to start screening through resumes, I'm having to look through like at least like 50 some resumes sometimes for a particular position, sometimes in the hundreds. So I really don't have a lot of time because I have to start moving towards actually scheduling interviews with promising candidates. So I usually spend 5 seconds skimming through a resume. And if I don't see like the keywords that I'm looking for within those 5 seconds, I'm immediately rejecting. Or like if it already seems like this person's totally off the mark, already rejecting. If the resume is structured in a way that I can't even really read it, or like it's illegible, or it's in like really weird colors that hurt my eyes, I'm rejecting it because I just don't have enough time to spend like, you know, analyzing each individual sentence. So that's why it's really great to use tools like this word cloud thing. So that way you can know what are like the key words that are popping out a lot and sprinkle them into your resume constantly, like wherever you can. Yeah, so that's what I would recommend. And even if like, you know, at Mindvalley, we have recruiters that scan the resumes, but there are even some companies that are bigger that they don't even have recruiters looking at resumes in the first step. They're actually automating it through like software and through like AI programs. So it's the same thing. Like the AI programs, they'll be scanning through your resume, and if they don't see the keywords, they reject. So that's why it's so important to like actually go through the job description and make sure that you're tailoring your resume to whatever is in the job description.
So that means one of the key things that AI looks for is like almost like the keywords, right?
Yes.
That's really good to know. Okay, so let's say they've done that step of they put the word cloud of the job description, they compare it to the resume, and they feel like it's a pretty healthy, you know, it's representative, right? What then? Like, are they ready to just submit it right away, or is there anything else that you would suggest them do differently?
So apart from making sure that you have the keywords, one thing I also like to say to make your resume really sexy and to really sell yourself more to the recruiters is you want to make sure that your resume is not reading like a laundry list, right? You don't want to just be bullet points like, you know, oh, I worked at a restaurant, I waited tables, I cleaned tables, and then I also took orders. Like that's kind of boring, and that doesn't really tell me like what you actually bring to the table. So as much as possible, you want to actually go through each experience and really elaborate more on what was it that you like achieved, what did you contribute, like really being very specific about like what you brought to the table at every experience. So rather than just like, you know, if you were at a restaurant, I waited tables, you can be like, I like increased customer satisfaction by like bringing like in, you know, a personal touch in every interaction, like something like that. Or like, you know, I achieved like, I won employee of the month twice in a row because I always had like the highest amount of like employee or like good feedback whenever like we ended the week. Whatever it is that you achieved, you really want to highlight that. And if maybe, let's say, you know, you're a little bit newer in your work and maybe you don't have as many like key achievements, you can also emphasize things that you learned. maybe at that restaurant job, you might not have done a whole lot and it seems like it's not that impressive, but something you learned was, like interpersonal skills. I learned interpersonal skills because I was constantly having to interact with clients, or like I learned how to think on my feet, and be like really able to work in a fast-paced environment. So those are ways that you can kind of like still flesh out your experiences a little bit more and make them sound a little bit sexier, rather than just like very like plain bullet points of like your key tasks that you had to do every week that might not be as relevant to the new role. Yeah, and otherwise, I think things that also make the resume really stand out and really seem sexy is when you can incorporate numbers into it a little bit more. So numbers in terms of like, really quantifying what did you do? Like, if you were in sales, I did an average of like 60 sales calls every week. Or like I achieved like a 36% increase in the revenue for my team as a result of my efforts, whatever it is, like the more you can really quantify that really shows to a recruiter like, hey, wow, like this person is like a high achiever, look at the results that they bring. And also because there are numbers, it kind of forces the recruiter to slow down a little bit in their reading speed because it changes it up. So yeah, those are some things I would recommend.
Interesting. So I think that is really about selling yourself, right? Like being all sexy and interesting. And, I hate to say this, but, like Asians being Asians, this element of being like humble and, it's kind of embedded within the society. I'm not representing everybody. I'm not saying this is everyone, but this is kind of where I kind of feel it, so how do we then manage this? Like, I want to sound all sexy and selling myself and still kind of retain that humility, or, does that work for you, or how do we kind of manage that?
I think it's okay to be humble maybe in the interview itself, but again, remember in the resume, the recruiter possibly only has 5 seconds that they're looking at the resume. So you really want to make sure that you're catching their attention quick. And then like, when you're actually talking to them face to face or on a phone call, then you can be, a little bit more humble, slightly. But your resume is really like your first chance to like really get your foot in the door. So you want to make sure that you're just like, not holding back at all. And even if you feel kind of shy, like just remember, this isn't about like, being humble, being shy. We just want to know, like, what have you done in the past? What are you good at? So that way we can see, are you a good fit for this potential role? Or at least do you have potential for it? So help us figure out if you're a good fit by really selling yourself and putting yourself out there.
So what if this person, just graduate or is in university or is just graduating, doesn't actually really have any experiences like that to talk about, right? What can they do? Because they're kind of stuck in that position where a lot of companies are like, oh yeah, you don't have or work experience, and then they're like, well, no one's willing to give me that work experience for me to write about. So how do they break out of that cycle?
That's a great question. So here are like a few like things that I sometimes recommend like fresh grads to put in the resume or to think about including in the resume to flesh it out a little bit more. First of all, like if you do have any like internship or part-time job experience, even if it's something as simple as like working in a restaurant, like there's no shame in that. We understand that you just graduated, but at least that you had some sort of work experience. And again, like, making sure that you spin in a way that you're not just bullet point listing like the basic task, but you're including what you learned. That can help you out a lot. You can also include projects that you worked on in university, like major collaborative team projects that you had to deliver, or final theses. I've seen that a lot when I'm screening through resumes, and that also can be quite relevant depending on whatever you're applying to. When all else fails, sometimes I also like to encourage like young people in particular, if you don't have experience, make the experience. Find ways that you can create little passion projects that already start helping you dabble in those skills. So that way you can then present them. Like, so for instance, if you're wanting to go into social media somehow, like you better believe that you should already be starting to practice like, social media by setting up your own Instagram channel or Facebook group and really show to them like, yeah, like it's small, but look at how I increased my followers from nothing to like 500 within a certain time frame. Or I learned how to keep up a content like calendar as a result of like doing this on my own. So there's always ways that you can get around a lack of experience as long as you're willing to kind of, be entrepreneurial about it and see how you can go ahead and start working in that area in a small way. So you can show that you're really proactive and really ready and eager to learn.
Yeah. That's one of my personal favorite things or ways of doing it, right? Instead of trying to wait for someone to give me that experience, I create it myself. And that's, initially when I first started the whole personal finance site back in Canada, it was literally just a way for me it's a playground for me, right? Like I can try everything I want, everything I've read, I can try and just constantly to iterate, which eventually got me to where I am today. And especially if you're looking at like a role, because in university, you're not going to learn anything like digital really, right? You're not going to learn how to operate advertising. You're not going to know how to create YouTube videos or manage a community or, create a podcast or anything like that, right? But these are all roles that are very, very valuable inside a company. So to be able to take something that you're interested in talking about and just create content, use it as like a playground for yourself or a little sandbox to test everything you want so you can actually talk about it with other people. Definitely my favorite way.
Exactly. Totally agree.
I want to echo that. And I think a lot of people, when they try to do something, they want to make it big, right? But the reality is, there needs to be a lot of things that align such that it becomes big. But in this process of experimenting and trying and have that kind of growth mindset, it really builds, your experience, and it builds that kind of affirmation of self and affirmation of your skills. So in any case, if this passion project just stays as a passion project, you can kind of like exactly what you say, repurpose it in a way of putting in your resume and say, I've done this. And it's very, very easy to just, share a link and, this is what I've done. You actually show people you've done it, right? So I think that is very convincing in my viewpoint.
Yeah, how I got one of my first small jobs after university was literally I got like a freelance gig as a graphic designer for a social media page. And the way I got it was just, in university, I did like this volunteer project where I was like creating content for a social media for a nonprofit organization. And I was like creating graphics myself. And because I did that for like 2 months, it allowed me to get that freelance gig. And you never know like what little small things that you can do to like help you start to build your skills.
Exactly. I think a lot of people need to have the kind of growth mindset and just kind of take things as they go along. If you don't have it, do something. If you don't have it, do something. Learn and validate along the process, and ultimately you get there, right?
Yeah.
Cool stuff.
Yeah. So at that point, it seems like they now have a resume. They've submitted it, and let's say they've been shortlisted for an interview, right? I think this when I remember when I first started this space, like this is probably like when I actually got scary of like, oh, what do I like? Who is this person? What do I need to think about? What do I say? And I guess, at that, not that long ago, but how do I dress? Everything like that, right? So what's your suggestion for people who have that, they've passed that first stage and now they have this opportunity to get interviewed?
Yeah, great question. So just like with resume, I think the preparation that you do beforehand is so essential, not only because you want to make sure that you're presenting yourself in the best light, but also it'll really help the nerves as well. I totally agree when you're first getting started, or even like, even years after doing job interviews, they still get kind of scary sometimes. So the more you can really prepare upfront, the more comfortable you can feel and more relaxed, more confident. So things that you can really do, even like before starting to think about what kind of questions they might ask, you want to make sure that you've done your research on the company itself. So really, like, not just like the job description, but even like read up on the company, read up on, oftentimes with bigger companies, they'll have a career website, just like with Mindvalley. So read up on like what their culture is like, what kind of opportunities there are at Mindvalley, what kind of growth you can get out of the company, or maybe even what the company has done in the news recently. And why you want to really read that is because, inevitably, every recruiter is going to ask you if you have any questions. And if you ask a really basic question like, what is the company culture like? That just shows to us that you haven't done any research. Okay. Like, it's cute that you're asking, but, I would prefer you to come prepared with something a little bit more specific to show that you actually really do care. So when you can like do some research and like be able to even say like, oh, okay, like Mindvalley recently created this podcast about like working remotely. So that could be something that you could ask in the interview. Like, how are you like helping all of your employees, work remotely in this time of coronavirus? It seems really interesting. Like specific questions that can go deeper into whatever role you're interested in, or to learn more about the culture in a deeper way. Apart from doing your research on the company, obviously, there are some very common questions that you're almost always asked. The most basic and most common of them of all is probably just, tell me about yourself. And I know like some candidates sometimes get like, a little frustrated, like, oh, like, I'm 4 interviews in and they're still asking me a super basic question, like, tell me about yourself and why you're interested. Like, just roll with it, because usually it's a different person interviewing every single time. Maybe they didn't have necessarily a lot of time to prepare in advance because they're coming in and out of meetings or back-to-back interviews. It's all blurring together. So make sure that like, you prepare for that like 1 minute or like 2-minute pitch about yourself. And really, make sure that you come off not just like showing like what your personality is like, but also really highlighting why you're the best fit for that particular role, or why, you would make a really good fit at the company as a whole. Apart from that, also like, making sure that you're really clear on what your strengths and weaknesses are, I think is always a really great way to prepare for interviews, because inevitably they're going to ask you about those either directly or maybe even indirectly. They might try to see like, what have been your past failures, or, what have been your biggest successes? And those can often be linked to your strengths and weaknesses. So making sure that you're very clear on those can kind of help you. And then I think, another way to really prepare is a lot of times in interviews, they'll ask you what we call like behavioral questions. Like, tell me about a time when you failed, or tell me about a time when you had to deal with a crisis in a team, or a conflict in a team, or tell me about a time where you had to stand up for yourself, these sort of like situational kind of questions. So you want to make sure that you come prepared with like a few stories that you can really draw from. And you don't have to come up with a different story for every single fathomable question that they could ask you. It's more like going back to your resume and looking at, okay, what are like, 1 or 2 of the really key like experiences where I feel like I achieved a lot, or I did a lot of really cool stuff. I worked on this really incredible project. And make sure you know that story that comes from that experience like inside and out. So that way you can really tailor that story to fit a variety of situations. So one really powerful, amazing story could be a blanket cover for any sort of question that they could ask you. So that way you don't have to worry about like memorizing 1,000 questions that they could potentially ask, but rather just like, how can I tailor it to any situation?
Cool.
Yeah.
Wait, let me just ask you a question. So
Okay.
you talk a little bit about talking about your strengths and talking about your weaknesses, right? So I think we all kind of know how to talk about strengths, but I'm curious, how do I present my weaknesses, in a way that I don't look weak. I just want to tell you this is, my weaknesses, right? But how do I kind of put it in a positive way, like such that you will receive it positively?
Yeah, I think weaknesses, as well as like whenever they ask you about your failures, it's kind of the same thing, right? Like, you don't want to sort of give a very generic answer like, I'm a perfectionist, because then that makes you sound not very genuine, right? Every time I hear that, I just feel like, okay, I'm done with the interview. I'm done. Goodbye.
Bye.
No, with a lot of these questions, like the reason why they ask is they want to see if you're self-aware. So it does, benefit you to be very honest and open about what your weaknesses are. How you can spin it in a positive light is show like, not only what your weakness or what your past failures have been, but also how are you working on them now? Or how are you addressing them now? What is like your action plan to work on it? If we can see that, like you're able to like not only be aware of what your weaknesses are, but you're going to take ownership over it. You're going to be proactive over like filling the gaps of whatever that is. That shows to us like, oh, okay, like, we could potentially trust them, even if like maybe one of your weaknesses seems like it's kind of in direct conflict with this particular position that we're looking for. Maybe they still can like sort of be trained or like coached on how to overcome that issue.
Cool, thanks.
So the tell me about, I want to go back to the tell me about yourself question. That is definitely one that I never really know what exactly they want. Like, you wanted me to tell you about my life story and like all the all the turbulences that went through and how I got here. Do you want me to talk about just like all the different extracurricular things, or are you only looking for things that you feel like would be related to this role? And that's, these are always things I kind of went through my mind when being asked that, right? What exactly are they really trying to get out of that question?
I think it's okay to like tell a little bit of backstory about yourself, but please don't go into your life story. Sometimes that happens to me with candidates. And, I'll ask them like, oh, tell me a little bit about yourself and why you're applying for Mindvalley. And then suddenly like 15 minutes later, they're still talking. It's like, maybe we should wrap this up, please. Yeah, so I think it's good for you to kind of narrow it down into a 3-minute window. So maybe like the first minute could be you kind of giving context of like, where you came from, like what your interests were, and then transition that into like what your big calling is, either in life or like your mission, like your 5-year plan, or like where you kind of see yourself. And then then you can transition that into, so how does that fit into this particular role, or how does that fit into this company? And, really ending by like, not only having that very clear line of like, this is how my personal like backstory and mission connects to the company, but also like, what you're going to bring to the table if you're hired for this role. I think if you can nail that in like 3 minutes time already, that's like a powerful start. And the recruiter can really like dig deeper into that. But yes, like, try not to go into a 10-minute rant, but also try to, go a little bit deeper than just like, hi, my name is Katie. I was an international relations student, and now I'm looking for a job in HR. You want to like give a little bit more substance than that.
Okay, thank you for that. Like, definitely helps me, and I'm sure it's going to help lots of other people. Okay, so how do I phrase this? Is there something specific that that this first interview that the HR person is looking for?
Yeah, I think that'll depend from company to company, but usually in the first like phone screen or first interview, it's always to see like a basic culture and skill fit. So like, for example, for Mindvalley, we have a lot of values that we want to make sure that everyone that comes into Mindvalley has those same core values. So we'll ask a lot about, like your past experiences, what you value like in life, in your team environments, and that sort of thing. And if we can see that there's some commonality in like your answers as well as Mindvalley's, that's a good sign for us. We might also ask things related to like your skill sets, like just like a very brief, like doesn't need to be like super in depth, because usually later interviews will go more in depth into your professional experiences, but just to get like a temporary check to see like, oh, have they had experience in whatever background we're looking for this particular role. Like, do they have leadership experience? Have they worked in a project similar to this? Do they have some achievements that could lend itself to this future role? Just to kind of get a brief sensing before you move on. And then also sometimes it's just like logistical related stuff as well. So for instance, like we might ask, like about your notice period, if you need, if you're a foreigner, like, if you're willing to relocate here, those kind of things, just to make sure like, there's no red flags from the get-go. But the first interview is more just like, basic fit. It's usually the second and third interview that are going to be a little bit more intense. They're going to be longer. They're going to be throwing a lot of like, behavioral or situational questions at you. So those are going to be the ones where you might want to like prepare more in depth to make sure that you're really ready for those.
Nice. I got another question here. So what is the general consensus? If I don't know if you have a general consensus about this, but with someone who has like some, like, they're doing some sort of side hustle, is that considered like a red flag for a company because they're like, oh, this person might not stay as long, or how does a company take that?
I think that will definitely depend from company to company. At Mindvalley, we love it when people have side hustles, honestly, because to us, that really shows that they're very entrepreneurial, that, they're really good at problem solving, that they're also probably good at like time management and productivity if they can manage a full-time job and a side hustle at the same time. So for us, that's always a good sign. And sometimes you could even use your side hustle as a way to like further display how you're a good skill fit, especially if like you're making an industry change. Like most of your professional experiences has been in like accounting, but your side hustle is related to social media marketing. So that might be your way into like transferring into like more of a marketing industry, and you can use that to sell it. But yeah, like I think it'll depend, if it's a more traditional company or if they kind of have a company culture that's a bit more stiff or conservative, maybe they wouldn't be as interested in the side hustle. But if it's an entrepreneurial company, if it's a startup, I think they would love to see that kind of initiative.
Yeah. I guess my thoughts on that is if that company is not okay with side hustles, for me, like I would be questioning their culture of like, is this going to be a place where I'm actually going to enjoy being in, right? If I can't have another way of expressing myself or doing something I love, and if majority of the people there are probably not doing something like that, can I actually connect with these people as well as I could? So that to me is almost like a red flag for the company, right?
Yeah, if that's something that you value, obviously you want to make sure that you're applying to companies that have a culture that you could really see yourself thriving in, and ideally that you would stay in for long term, right? So if one thing that you value is having more entrepreneurial attitude or having the freedom to pursue your passion projects, then yeah, I would definitely say that's a red flag if they're not okay with it.
So we actually have a question here, or not really a question, but it's just from Vinci here. Attitude is more important, and I guess it's. I mean, let's just talk about attitude versus skill. Where do you see that?
That's a great question, actually. So I think when the roles are more entry level, or like don't really require a whole lot of experience, I definitely think attitude is super important. And this is especially true at Mindvalley for some of our entry level roles. Like we would almost rather you come in with like only like a year's worth of work experience, but be a super like culture fit, value fit, really demonstrate a lot of the values that we like embrace here at Mindvalley, than like seeing a CV that has like a person that's done that for like 5+ years, but they're not a culture fit at all. Because to us, like usually like attitude and like your values, those aren't always things that can be trained. Those are oftentimes like innate, or like you can kind of coach them, but it takes a lot of investment, whereas skills can be trained. That said, like obviously there are going to be exceptions. If you're wanting to apply to like a very senior role or like a manager role, like you are going to need some kind of experience in that. And that's not to say like, oh, you have a bad attitude, so you can never your attitude isn't strong enough, or like, anything like that. But sometimes you do need a little bit of like professional experience for those higher level roles, just because otherwise you're going to feel quite lost without it. So yeah, I would say like, just double check and like ask yourself honestly, like, is this role like entry level or more junior? If so, then probably, yeah, it might be fine to just have the attitude really strong and less skills. But if it's more technical or like more senior, then you are going to need a little bit of professional background.
Nice.
Nice. I just want to ask a question here. So
Sure.
like we keep talking about selling ourselves to the company, right? Like presenting yourself, sounding sexy, attractive. Is there a situation where the company will then kind of sell themselves to us? Right?
Always.
Maybe, right? Like at the fourth interview, or how does that work? Like, how do we kind of manage that relationship? Right? We're all negotiating, right, at that point in time. So yeah, how do we kind of manage through that process? Probably is it at the last phase of the interview, like the last few interviews? How does that work?
I mean, if the company knows what they're doing, they should be selling themselves from the minute that you apply, honestly. Like that's something that we've been working on a lot at Mindvalley, really working on our employer branding and really putting ourselves out there on LinkedIn, on making our career website look super sexy. Even in the culture screening, what I often do, that very first interview that we have with candidates, I actually do that with more of the entry-level positions. And after I hear their elevator pitch about who they are and where they come from, I also give a little bit of a pitch about Mindvalley and about like the team that they're applying to and like what's the context of the role that they're applying to. So that way they know like, oh, right off the bat, like, is this exciting to me or not? And I like give them so much time to ask questions because I want to make sure that they're not waiting until the last interview to figure out if they like the company or not. Like they should be thrilled and excited from the first interview. Obviously, not every company might be like that, but I would say most of the good companies are trying to sell themselves from the very beginning. But yeah, there might be a little bit of back and forth throughout all the interviews, especially in the last interview. Usually that'll be more of like, final checks to make sure you're a good fit, but also like really like making sure that you're really interested and you're ready to take the offer as soon as we give it to you. So it's something to expect. One thing I always like to tell myself, especially when, I'm on the opposite side and I have to apply for jobs, is, if I'm ever feeling nervous about going into an interview or something like that, thinking about the fact that they're also very desperate to find the right fit, right? Like I want this job, I'm desperate for this job, but they're also looking for someone to solve their problems. That's the whole reason why they have this job opening. So they're probably also like nervous and anxious and like looking for the perfect person. So I always try to like remind myself that. It helps me calm down, and then it makes me like try to reframe it like, okay, I'm going to be that person. I am going to be the one that's going to solve all their problems. I'm exactly what they're looking for. And now I just have to show them that. It always helps me a lot.
Cool, thanks. And I'm just a little curious at the stage where the company offers, right? So that means like we're good, we're done, matchmaking, cool, right? So this is the ring, right? And
This is the ring.
yeah, and at
Is it
this
an expensive enough ring?
yeah, man. So at this point in time, would you advise the candidate to straight away accept that offer or negotiate on that offer?
That's
Right?
a great question.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you would have already done a little bit of like gentle asking about like, what is like the typical salary range, either like to the recruiter itself, or like you can even go through Glassdoor. You can go if you have any potential like connections inside the company already that can maybe give you an insight on what the salaries are like. You can use that way as well. So hopefully you've already done a little bit of like gentle nudging already. So that way you can better assess like when that offer is on the table, does this work out or not? From there, like if you know that it's a good offer, I think it's fine to go ahead and accept. But if you think that maybe like you could negotiate a little bit more, it's fine to ask. I think, there's nothing wrong with like giving it a try, as long as you don't ask for something really ridiculous or something that you already know is kind of way out of their like salary benchmarks. It's fine. You never know. And like recruiters are always like welcome to like answer your questions, like maybe schedule a call with you to see like what's possible and what's not. Just as long as like, once they do tell you like, oh, like this is kind of the range that we can operate within. And like what you're asking for is a little bit above. So are you okay to kind of like step back down to this level? Then, okay, great. That's great. I just wanted to check to make sure that I'm really like, getting my full value from this offer.
So salary benchmarks. And this people call it salary benchmark. There's always some sort of like a band per se, where kind of salary band. Why does something like that even exist? Like, I guess the way I look at it is like, shouldn't the company already be going out with their best offer right away, and then it's either you take it or you leave it, and at the same time, like that employee doesn't feel like, oh, maybe I should have asked for more. Like, what's the rationale for having something like that?
So admittedly, it's not like compensation and benefits isn't totally in my wheelhouse, but I know like the basics. So I'll just give you like my perspective on it. A lot of times with Mindvalley, the reason why we don't necessarily give the upper ends right away is because we actually use the benchmarks as a way for career progression. So oftentimes like if this is like the salary benchmark for a particular role, the reason why we might kind of start you like on this side is that like this is like junior level, and then when you go further, that's like mid level, and then when you go further, that's senior. So if you like right away like ask for like the highest level, then we're like, well, technically, when we compare your skills to other like senior level people in Mindvalley, you're not quite there yet. And here are like some areas that you can grow in to get there. But for now, we're going to let you stay here in the more mid-range or maybe even junior range, depending on what your experience is. So it's not like we're like trying to like cheat you or like, try to like skimp on salaries as much as possible. It's just that like, according to our models, these benchmarks are a way for you to see like how you're growing in the company, how you're like, how as you build your skills and experiences, you're actually raising like your level of seniority as well.
Thank you for that. And I actually want to go back to one of the topics that you mentioned earlier. And it's the idea of like, you, even though you might be nervous, the company's also nervous in trying to find a candidate. I think some people like watching this, live or watching a replay of this, don't really understand what that means, right? Could you dig deeper into that?
Sure. I mean, there will be some roles that maybe we are always recruiting for and we kind of have a steady supply for, but there are some roles that are actually quite hard for us to recruit for, either because they're super technical. Like in general, tech recruitment is always like a battlefield, right? All the companies are trying to find the best tech talent and attract them at whatever cost. Or it could even just be like, maybe it's like a very niche role. Like for instance, one thing that Mindvalley has been doing is we've been trying to localize our products in different languages. So that means sometimes we need native speakers, and we can't always find that in Malaysia. So we have to, go outside of our scope and look for like really niche languages to make that happen. So because of that, sometimes once we get people apply, we are just so like, please like work out. We want you to like, we want a good fit. We've been recruiting for this role for like 6 months already. Please like save us and be like the perfect one that we're looking for. So like, I'm not kidding when like the recruiters also can sometimes like be like super anxious, like, oh, I hope this interview goes well. Like I'm really looking for that good fit. And sometimes even as recruiters, at Mindvalley, the recruiters like will take you through every step of the way. We'll be like cheerleading for you on the inside. Like, yes, they made it to the second interview. I have a good feeling. Oh, they're in the final interview. Good luck. Like, I know you could do the best. Like, because we want those roles to be filled. Like for us, like by filling roles, that's how we know we're going to be able to progress the company and be able to achieve some of our strategic visions. So that's why, like, we're also very anxious and eager to get like the right fit. And why I like to say to candidates, like, there's no need to be nervous. Like, honestly, like, we are just so thrilled to meet with you and to see if it's a good fit. And if it's not a good fit, it just wasn't meant to be. Maybe there's a better place that fits for you. But if it is a good fit, oh my gosh, we're so excited. We're so ready to welcome you into our wonderful family.
Yeah, I think that's something that once I guess you have a few jobs under yourself and you are actually on the inside and you notice like, oh man, there are some roles that just are so hard to fill, right? And for you to realize, oh, actually, I am actually doing the company a service as well in applying and putting my best foot forward because these people really need my skills, right? And to have that confidence and belief in yourself, I think that's a really important thing to carry out when you go through some, a process like finding it, going through jobs and interviewing and all that.
For sure.
I'm curious, like, what are some of these very difficult to fill roles? Are you comfortable sharing with us?
Sure. It really just depends. I think the role that I just recently filled, which we literally have been recruiting for like more than a year, and then I got assigned the project. I was like, oh no. It was like a technical SEO specialist. In general, like SEO skills, like are because they're so new, right? So like there's not always a lot of people that have a lot of experience in that. And then to like not only find the right experience, but also the right culture fit. Since it is more of a technical role, and sometimes it's hard for us to find good culture fits in more technical roles.
So much undertone going there, like tech people, they have a certain vibe,
Well, it's not, like we don't discriminate, but like we're looking for like common like behaviors or like interest in like personal growth, and maybe that's not always like you don't find that always in that sort of industry.
Space.
Yes. So that's a role that like took a long time. Other roles, sometimes like more financial roles, sometimes take a while because you want to make sure that you have a really solid financial person, right? Like you can't skimp on that. They need to have their good skill sets, really good integrity, and be able to work well with the team. And other roles, just ones related to like the languages. Like we had a hard time finding like German speakers, for instance, for a while, just because it was there's why would German speakers come to Malaysia? You don't always know. So it was always interesting trying to convince them, like, oh no, this is where it's at. Like it's so much fun working in Malaysia and being in Mindvalley. You totally want to be here.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. Nice. Yeah. And any other questions from you, Chan?
Go for it.
I just want to kind of roll back all the way to the front, right? Like when we're talking about, what to do in this point in time, right? When everything is so messy. So we talk a little bit about like brushing up our resumes. We talk about preparing our interview capacity, right? Essentially, all this talk is making you a better person when you go to interviews, right? So, and one thing you talk about is like reconnecting with your network. Right. So yes, could you like just dive in a little bit more? What is reconnecting with network? And I have another question: is what is the difference between network and friends? Right? Yeah. So I want to hear a little bit what are your thoughts on this?
This is a great question. It's something that I've been talking about a lot and sharing a lot on LinkedIn in the past month, especially now that like we're all kind of forced to do social distancing. You want to make sure that you're staying in touch with people, whether in a personal level or professional level, whatever it is, just so we all stay sane. To answer your question about like what's the difference between friends and network, honestly, I don't see a huge difference necessarily. I think even your friends can be part of the network or can lead you to future job opportunities. Honestly, a lot of the jobs that I got in the beginning were because I knew somebody who knew somebody. So by reaching out to my friends and saying, hey, like, I'm kind of looking for this. Do you know anyone that works in that industry or like with this company that I'm looking for? And they can help me get my foot in the door. So don't underestimate like your personal connections or your family connections, especially like if you're just getting started and you don't have much of a professional network to begin with, those personal connections can still help you pave the way. Now, when it comes to like, what do I mean when I say like reconnecting with your network? I think now is the best time to start like connecting with old friends, old colleagues, alumni from your university. First of all, to check in, like, how are they doing? How is their life? And are they staying healthy? But also like seeing like, what have you been up to? Like, where are you working now? Like, what cool projects have you been on? Because you never know like what those little conversations can then spark later on. Especially like, if you're wanting to potentially make a career change, or maybe you want insights on how you can like better prepare yourself, gain new skills, and make yourself more marketable in the future. You don't know like who could help you potentially along that way. One thing I always like to encourage people to do is informational interviews. As like a candidate, this is where like you reach out to someone and say like, hey, can I book you for 30 minutes? And you just tell me a little bit about your career journey, or like about the company that you're working for, especially if that's like a company that you're really looking to apply to in the future. And they can give you like all the insider tips on like what it's like, the pros, the cons, like all the stuff that they don't necessarily put on their career website. So that way, then like when you go to the interviews potentially later on, you can like become prepared and really know like what they're kind of looking for, or like what you're getting yourself into. So now is the perfect time. Like last week, I was reconnecting with a couple of my old like university friends. The week before that, I was reconnecting with my team when I was working in a nonprofit organization, and like catching up on like all the things that they've been doing. And already like I'm starting to see like some connections, like, oh, I need to follow up with them even more on that topic, because that's an area that I'm also interested in. You never know. So use this time wisely and have those interesting conversations.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. And you talk a little bit about like skills, right? So for someone that's trying to do a career switch, right? Like we keep talking about the accountant trying to make a career switch, right? Are there some platforms that they can pick up new skills or learn somewhere, or just kind of reskill themselves so that they can become a better fit before coming to the company? Yeah.
Oh, there's an abundance of platforms all over. I mean, like you have your giants like Coursera, or like edX, or Udemy, Skillshare, like all over. Like almost like there's more resources out there than you can ever go through. So definitely check those out. And especially now that, with the whole coronavirus, some of them are even giving discounts, or like, a month or two long like trial periods for you to test out some of their programs. So definitely take advantage of those. And like, because I say like there's almost like too much content out there, what you might even want to do is really like do your research first on like what are going to be the most in-demand skills both now and also 5 years from now. So one thing that like I always like to do to make sure that I'm keeping my skills up to date is I look at reports from like the World Economic Forum, for instance, or like Forbes or Harvard Review or whatever, and see like what do they feel are going to be like the top trends in my industry, or the top skills that are going to be in demand, and then find the courses based off of that. That's actually how like this year I've been getting into people analytics and data analytics, because I've been seeing all over the place like that's going to be like a huge key specialization for HR in the future. So I want to make sure that I'm building those skills now, so that way I can be even more marketable in the future.
Cool stuff. Thanks. Awesome.
Okay, I know we're coming to the top of the hour, but there's just two comments left that I just want to quickly take care of. So Sean here, super nice to hear from the other side. Totally agree, Sean. We will try to bring up more of these conversations in the future. And an actual question here from Hakeem: who can be the best person as a reference? Companies tend to require references in place, in a resume.
So I think it's good to have a mix of both managers and colleagues, just so they can give you that different perspective on both like what it's like to manage you as an employee, and also what is it like to work with you. Obviously, you want to try to use references that could give a very good light of you, unless like, you know, the company that's doing the reference checks is requiring you to like do like your current and most recent employer. So try to see if you can find people that you feel like can like do justice, that know you pretty well. And I also recommend, like, you know, if you do ask people to be your reference, go ahead and prep them in advance. Like, don't tell them like you have to say this, or you have to make me look good, but you can say like, this is what they're looking for, XYZ. Can you make sure to emphasize that like this skill in particular is one of my strengths? Or like, you know, maybe talk a little bit more about this project that I did in the reference check, just so that way they're prepared, especially if you're asking for a reference of someone that maybe it's been like a year or two since they worked with you, so they need a little bit of a refresher. It's just always good practice. And of course, thank them afterwards, because, you know, it's always nice to make sure they feel appreciated after doing you that solid.
Perfect.
Cool.
And so yeah, so we are out of time. But if you don't mind quickly saying, like, how would someone apply to a company like Mindvalley? Like, what's Mindvalley really looking for?
What we're looking for the most, I mean, if I don't know if people already know about Mindvalley, but basically we are an education company specifically focused on transformational education. So everything related to personal growth, whether it's finance or meditation, health and fitness, you name it. So first and foremost, what we're looking for is people that are interested in personal growth and that are constantly trying to, you know, gain new skills, learn a lot, who are working on themselves and developing themselves constantly as a lifestyle. Secondly, we're looking for people that are very visionary, because we have this really big goal of basically like totally revolutionizing education on the global level. So because we have such a big goal, we want to make sure that everyone that's coming into Mindvalley also is really ambitious. They're really hungry. They're visionary thinkers, like, you know, on a big scale or even in a small scale, because, you know, that's what's going to make us progress as a whole. And then last but not least, we just want to make sure that you really embody our values, like one of which that's really important to us is unity. So making sure that you're really good with like diverse environments, that you really believe that we're all one human race, and, you know, you're full of love and compassion towards everyone. Those are the kind of things that we're looking for.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Katie, for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. Yeah, it was definitely some really great insights that I'm sure lots of people have found very useful. And thank you everyone else who's watching right now. As always, really appreciate your time. Tomorrow, we do not really know who we're going to bring on. It might just be a session between Reggie and I. I think it's been a while since we've had a chance to do that. So we'll do a little dance there. But if you guys do have any thoughts or comments on who you would like to see on, or what types of topics you would like us to cover, please leave a message wherever you're seeing this, so we know about that and we can try, you know, catering this more and more for you guys. All right. But till then, thanks a lot and take care.
See ya.
Bye.